firing system for the sound suppression water will be armed in just a couple seconds from now. It has been armed. T-minus 45 seconds and counting. T-minus 40 seconds and counting. The development flight instrumentation recorders are on. T-minus 35 seconds. We're just a few seconds away from switching to the redundant sense sequencer. T-minus 27 seconds. We have gone for redundant set sequencer start. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15, 14, 13, T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. Liftoff of America's first space shuttle. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Roger. Columbia, Houston, you're go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up.
Roger, Columbia, on the nice ride. You're lofting a little bit. You'll probably be slightly high at staging.
1 minute 45 seconds coming up on go, no go.
Columbia, you're negative seats.
That call up says that Columbia, the altitude is too high for ejection seat use. Mark.
Columbia, you're go for SRB SEP.
2 minutes 4 seconds, standing by for SRB SEP confirmation.
There we go. Roger on the SEP, Columbia.
Mark, 2 minutes 20 seconds, confirm solid rocket booster SEP.
That means those two rockets on either side of the main fuel tank. Didn't it? It doesn't seem like 2 days ago.
Well, it was a different era.
They come out at 34 miles up there, going more than 8,000 miles an hour, so they're moving right along.
And we should be picking them up. We should be not picking them up, but we should be getting the first signals that they got through in about 1 minute and 15 seconds. So they're that close. And after that, a lot of things, as I say, happen very quickly. They will pass over the Big Sur coast here in California.
1 minute.
6 times the speed of sound. But after that, I mean, their critical periods are over. Their communications will be restored. The heating will have ended, and they will be
9,700 feet per second call.
They will be turning into a glider.
They're dropping now at 9,700 feet, and they're going.
AOS.
Stand
by. Mark.
I thought we got an acquisition of signal.
Control.
I thought we did too.
This is really the most important moment.
Disregard the Mach 9 call. We'll give it again shortly.
That's what I thought.
We'll go.
They could be off course. They could have suffered, shall we say, thermal damage, all kinds of damages coming down. You'll know that in about 15 or 20 seconds.
Range to go 410 nautical miles.
Stand by for Mark on 9,700 feet per second.
Sounds good.
Hello there. Houston, Columbia's here.
Sounds good.
Hello, Columbia. Houston's here. How do you read?
Land clear, and we're doing Mach 10.3 at 180 AS.
And we couldn't agree more, John. Your state vector's good. We've got good data in-house.
Okay, it looks to me like the L over D is nominal.
And now we think we may get a picture of it. A little tiny speck in your screen, and you're going to have to look very closely.
Mark, Mach 9 at 9,700 feet per second.
This is from the Air Force
Columbia,
long-range
perfect
camera.
energy, perfect ground track.
And as you can hear, I think,
Columbia
it's
now 9 times
perfectly
the speed of
moving.
sound. Flight dynamics
And John,
officer
we're
says
showing
he's
you rolling
perfect.
right. Looking good.
Right, normal roll. Rolling now.
We've got to slow it up a little bit as they come in.
Chase will be on time.
Okay.
Those are the chase aircraft. we're
Altitude
talking about.
152,000 feet, range 311 miles, speed Mach 8.8.
Well, they're right on the
Roll
money.
reversal complete.
Right on the money.
Columbia, we show you out of 151K now. 8.4 Mach, looking good.
Roger that, and I got a solid TACAN lock on TACAN 2 and 3.
Roger that, Crip. We're looking.
Approaching the coast of California now.
All three APUs hanging in there, looking good.
Roger that, we concur.
Their
We have a
hydraulic
live
systems in
television
good
picture
shape.
from the optical tracker at Anderson Peak.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah.
You can see it outlined against the
Crossing the
sky.
coastline
Columbia, we
now.
show you crossing the coast now.
Roger that. We concur.
6.6.
141,000 feet,
Dalton.
range
And
240
Columbia, we
miles.
like the TACANs. Go ahead and take them.
Okay, going in.
We are now just about 10 minutes away from touchdown here at
Crew
Edmonds.
now incorporating tactical air navigation system data into the spacecraft. Mach 7. 135,000 feet, range 221 miles.
Columbia,
Dead on the ground
very
track.
quiet to us.
Let's go out in here, too. What a way to come to California.
Columbia, you're out of 130K now on the tracking. 6.4 Mach, looking good.
Roger that. We agree with those numbers.
And Columbia, your nav state with TACAN is perfect.
Roger that. Mach 6, 124,000 feet. Range 177 miles.
And John, we're seeing near zero aileron trim.
We sent 2 tests. Yeah, less than that now.
Roger that, out of 119K, 5.5 Mach.
All flight controllers giving perfect report.
Roger, we copy.
Slowing.
Yes, hydrogen purge in progress.
Roger that, out of 112K, 4.8 Mach.
4.8 times the speed of sound.
John Young rolling using manual control now.
We see DELAS 21 degrees.
Roger that, looking good. Mach 4.4, 107,000 feet. Range 112.
Near the Tehachapi Range now. Mountains in California.
John, at the control in NASA terminology is Terminal Area Energy
Roll
Management.
reversal complete. Control looks good.
Columbia, we see roll reversal complete. Control looks good.
Ropes coming out.
They should be very near Bakersfield now.
And you're starting to get ammonia cooling now.
Roger, we concur.
And Columbia, you're out of 100K with positive seats. Looking good.
Lower than 100,000 feet.
ejection seats can be used now.
Beautiful.
Below 100,000. Mach 3.
Ropes out.
That's the landing control room on your screen now here at Edwards Air Force Base.
Roger that. Looking good. We're looking at them, and you're coming right down the chute.
Rudder active now, looking good. Range 73 miles.
Columbia, we're go for air data. You're out of 89K, 2.8 Mach.
Still twice the speed of sound. 89,000 feet.
Should hear a sonic boom.
Roger that. We're looking.
Okay, take in figure.
Roll reversal to the right.
Columbia, we see you coming right. Looking good.
Okay, Joe, I've had a hard time seeing the talkbacks on those landing gear hydraulic isolation valves. They look okay to you?
Okay, Crip, they all look good to us.
Roger that.
Big S-turns, Joe Kerwin.
No
Not in this
indication
case.
of it.
Not in this
Coming
We
case.
now
right
have a
in.
live television picture from the long-range optics at Dryden Flight
Columbia, you're
Research
coming
Center.
right down the track. The tracking data, nav data, and pre-plan trajectory are all one line on our plot boards here.
Roger, we concur.
Out of 70,000 feet at Mach 1.8, range 42 miles.
That is absolutely what the flight plan called for.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely. I mean, within inches.
They're going to be overhead here shortly.
Columbia, we show you very slightly high in altitude, coming down nicely, and the FES is to go to off.
Mach 1.3 at 58,000 feet,
Close.
range 33 miles.
They're nearing the west edge of the lake bed on which they will land now.
Out of 56K, looking good.
The sonic booms will be beginning around this part of California in just a minute.
Mach 1 at 51,000 feet, range 28 miles.
Columbia, you're going subsonic now, out of 50K, looking good.
Got to be about overhead. Those will be the chase.
Right.
If we watch them, we might pick it up.
Everything looking good.
Columbia, you're approaching the
It's the
hack
boom.
now, right on the money.
We just had the sonic booms here. I don't know if you could hear them or not.
Columbia getting ready to start the big sweeping turn into the runway.
Chase has a tally.
Chase has him in sight.
And Crip, altimeter 3009er.
38,000 feet, range 19 miles.
It is still descending
Columbia, you're coming right around the hack, looking beautiful.
at a downward glide path of 20 degrees, which is a very, very precipitous descent.
30,000.
They're going down about 13,000 feet
Control
per
very
minute,
smooth.
or dropping like a stone, as people on the ground say, but fully in
Columbia,
control.
you're really looking good, right on the money, right on the money. And we're seeing 1.3 Gs coming around the hack.
Roger that.
And turning on to final, your winds on the surface are calm.
I got a win.
25,000 feet.
Not a lot of stress on the pilots at this point or on the astronauts. Joe
No,
Kerwin.
no, they have it made now.
They're still dropping very quickly, and the next thing they'll
Mach
do
0.6,
is
range 13 miles.
is change the attitude.
22,000 feet. Control looking very smooth. Speed brake at 40.
That's the picture from the chase planes that
We
you're
have a
looking at now.
television picture now.
There it is.
You're right on the glide slope, Columbia.
There it is.
Right on glide slope. Approaching center line. Looking great.
This TV from the chase plane. $16,000 feet.
Mark 15.
Airspeed 271 knots.
The normal landing for a DC-9 is about
Fido says it
185.
couldn't be any better.
They will be down in that vicinity when they land here in about another minute and a
11,000
half.
feet.
That's real good underneath.
$9,000. 280 knots.
Everything looks real good. $5,290.
They're within 5 miles of the landing strip right now.
$2,500 feet.
Clear?
You heard him say pre-flare. That means he's going to change the angle from a 20-degree glide path to a 5-degree glide path.
There you can see them leveling off and
Now you
beginning
can
to
see him
flare up.
leveling off. That's it. That was pre-flare, and they did it. The next thing is the gear to go down. The landing gear will have to go down.
Here now.
There it is.
It's right behind you, John.
40, 30,
There he is. See him?
Yeah.
10.
It's incredible. It looks like Los Angeles Airport. It's perfect, and he's coming back from space.
2, 1, touchdown.
There they're down.
Here, 10 feet. 5, 4, 3, touchdown. Look about, skipper.
Got all the wheels down and it's rolling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see the little chase planes nearby. Now,
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
well, that's hardly the word. It's majestic. Now that plane will
We're going to
roll
test it off first.
and slow down. It'll take about, it's rolled about a mile now.
I'll tell you that. It was super.
Okay, convoy's on its way.
Convoy on. Wheel stop on the Columbia. Wheel stop.
That's it.
It's going to get a lot of attention from now on. There you can see it behind us. It was an exceptional sight, especially after having witnessed it take off 54 and a half hours ago and watch it come back
This is
here.
Mission Control Houston,
Joe
the
Kerwin,
unofficial touchdown
You ever get used to that kind of thing in the NASA
2
astronaut
days,
corps?
6 hours,
Not if
20
you're in
minutes,
it.
52 seconds.
That beauty's got
2 days,
99
6
more
hours,
flights
20
on it, and I
minutes,
want to
52
fly about
seconds.
8 of them.
And Columbia, Houston, we're estimating at least 26 more minutes on the ammonia. You're looking real good.
Now, what they're going to do now is that the technicians are going to go out there and sniff around to see if there are any toxic or hazardous chemicals
And as Columbia's
that are
main
still
gear
aboard.
touched the lake bed, the flight director's instructions were prepare for exhilaration.
They gave them 15 seconds at Mission Control to have a whoopee.
Oh,
as they
that's
put it.
right,
Then
that's
they had
right.
to put them back to work again.
I guess the whoopie's over already.
Houston, Columbia 18 shutdown is complete. Going on the doors.
Don't expect the astronauts
Roger.
to pop right out. They'll be in there for a while. There's a lot to do, and there are some toxic and explosive
Convoy is proceeding
materials
toward,
still
Columbia at this
perhaps
time.
aboard this aircraft. So they'll have to go very carefully about that. And astronauts Young and Crippen are still in their suits, and there's a great deal to be done before we'll see them come out at the end of this extraordinarily successful mission.
they've got to power it down, don't they? They've got a lot of switches and toggles to shut off.
And believe it or not, they still have a few tests to run as they power these systems down. All at their leisure now.
I must say, John Young told me before they launched it that he would be happy if they got it up and got it back.
They did, and he is.
This is Mission Control, Houston. We expect the crew to be able to get out of Columbia in about 45 minutes. That's a phenomenal time for safing and power down.
That was the quiet voice of Jack Riley, I believe, at Mission Control in Houston. They all have adopted the laconic mode at NASA. They're really very controlled and all that. They weren't so controlled when the shuttle landed, though, today, and we took some pictures of that at that time so we can show you what it's like in Mission Control in Houston at the conclusion of a mission that took 2 days, 6 hours, 20 minutes, and 52 seconds. That's how long it was. And that's the scene in Mission Control at the end of this successful mission of Columbia.
Beautiful, beautiful. Houston, Columbia, would you take a look at our home RCS? We think it's in proper configuration.
Roger, stand by, please.
I'll tell you something, for those of us who fly in commercial airliners, you see that one come back down 36 orbits after it left this Earth and land about a minute and a half within the scheduled landing time and right on the button in terms of the runway.
Tom, I have some reservation forms here. Would you care to fill one out?
I'll tell you. I bet they didn't lose any luggage either.
No, that's right.
Columbia, Houston, and convoy. OMS RCS safing is complete.
What you'll be seeing before long around the space shuttle there is a small fleet of trucks, and some of them with a very special purpose. The sniffers are there now, as they're called, the hazardous gas technicians, and something called the vapor disposal unit is going to be working before long. But these are men in specially equipped suits to see if there was, for example, excess hydrogen, various toxics.
Columbia using sniffers to detect any gases that may be escaping from the spacecraft.
Joe, if you look at that picture, I think you'll see that the tiles seem to be remarkably in place. That's something
Yes.
we were all looking for. We can't see it at very close range from here, but there certainly wasn't any large-scale breaking away of the tiles.
Any residual concern that we may have had was dissipated instantly when they called up at Mach 12 and said, nominal, we're on the right trajectory, our trim values are low, because one of the first things if a tile came off would be to affect the aerodynamics.
All right, well, it's looking good down here on the ground, just as it looked good up there in space and as it flew in its final approach. The Columbia is back, right on schedule, and we'll continue with our coverage of its activities now that it's back here at Edwards Air Force Base. We'll continue right after this.
That's affirmed. They've already had it.
We're back, and we have some company here at Edwards Air Force Base on the dry lake bed behind us. That's the Columbia orbiter with astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen back right on schedule. They'll be in there for about another 40 minutes or so before they can come out, but all of the post-landing procedures going very smoothly. They're not finding any toxic gases or anything wrong with the outside of the orbiter, and we presume that it's all going well inside as well. Let us show you now the landing of the Columbia orbiter, 36 and a half orbits after it took off from Cape Canaveral, Kennedy Space Center, on Sunday, just 54 and a half hours ago. This is what the landing looked like here. In that steep pitch described to you by John Chancellor at about 22 degrees, 7 times as great as a commercial airliner, beginning to flare out now. John Young at the controls, a dead stick landing so-called. No power, it's a glider at this point, and gliding very well, even though it's dropping fast. this part of the flight at least had been tested once before. Commander John Young returning from his 5th flight in space. This soft-spoken man from Georgia Tech has been on the moon, now has flown this historic first mission of the space shuttle. Pretty good scrapbook at the Young home, I would think, by this time.
I should think so.
And look at that landing in front of a few million people on television and lots of people here at Edwards Air Force Base.
Lots of millions on television, I would think, Tom. Gee, look at that. Those tiles just absolutely stayed on. I confess to having been scared to death about them. I think I'm not alone in that, incidentally. But look at that. That whole complicated system. It's the most complex vehicle ever assembled in the history of our species to do anything. There's the part of the convoy that's going out to surround the aircraft.
Well, NASA must be very happy because they'd had more than their share of problems with this space shuttle in terms of cost and delays. It's 2 years overdue. There are some critics who say it is not being used properly. It'll be used far too much for military purposes. But this very successful first test flight ought to make NASA happy and indeed proud.
Okay, excuse me, Joe, but I'm just going to say that the convoy commander, those trucks that we see around the shuttle now, it says that they found nothing dangerous or unusual when they checked out the aircraft, when the so-called sniffers went in there. The purge vehicles are on their way out there now to do their job, all right on schedule, and we'll explain the purge vehicles after this.
Wednesday on Real People, Sarah turns pro. Then Arnold may get a new mother on Different Strokes. And the girls go to a singles bar on Facts of Life on NBC.
The Columbia orbiter on the ground safely and very successfully here at the Rogers Dry Lake Edwards Air Force Base. And the astronauts will be in there for, about another 35 minutes or so. They stay in place, cooling it down. As a matter of fact, they've got something out there right now called the Orbiter Coolant Transporter. What it does is just provide air conditioning and to keep it cool. Well, lots of systems on board there. We talked a lot at the beginning of the launch and while it was in flight about how important it was to keep that thing cooled down.
That's right.
There's one interesting vehicle you'll be seeing out there in a little while, I think, unless they decided not to use it, and that is, I can't remember its technical name, but what it is, it's a truck with a propeller on it, an electric fan. And it's one of those vehicles that you see there now, and they get it from the orange growers around here. And it's designed to blow on things. It's maybe the world's largest electric fan on a truck. and it's got a fancy name which I can't think of, but that's a vapor disposal unit indeed, and that will be out there, making sure that there isn't anything toxic hanging around, anything that could explode. They'll be removing any excess hydrogen that they find, and that they will be pumping out the toxic and explosives by pumping humid air into the tanks of the Columbia. So it's a complicated operation. It's not dangerous, but they're making sure that nothing goes wrong. A lot of people came here a long way to see this, to watch it from the VIP section, and Heidi Schulman is there.
Maybe. Congratulations to you for a job well done.
And to all those associated with the program, he said he was sure this flight would
Roger.
put this country in the forefront of the space program, and he was very proud of that.
All right. We just heard a message relayed from President Reagan to the crew. Congratulations for a job well done. It puts the country back in the forefront of the space program, and he offers his congratulations. The President has been following this carefully from the White House, where he continues to recuperate from the bullet wounds suffered in that assassination attempt. He'll send his White House Chief of Staff, Jim Baker, to Houston to greet astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen. Crippen, a fellow Texan of Jim Baker.
That's right.
We've got a helicopter hovering off of the left side of the airplane as you look at it, to the right as we look at it, and they've asked him to move it out of there. You just heard one of the astronauts, or I heard him anyhow, saying, well, you've got the tow truck out here.
Houston has just asked again.
I think that they probably kicks up a lot of dirt and dust and so on, and as the astronauts
They're worried about that, and they're worried about a sudden engine failure or something, and the thing having to
they don't want it to
come
fall
down in the wrong place.
It's not right on top of it by any means, but
No.
it's now moving, but very slowly.
NASA's requesting that. Is that the White Room pulling up out there now?
I think it is, Tom. You talk and let me look.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's that, looks like a camper to you and me, but that's the special room in which the astronauts will be placed once they come down. And they'll be driven back to this special closed VIP area where they'll have a private greeting with members of their family before they're taken to the more public area. Lots of other campers here as well. People from, well, we presume from great distances, some of them, have come today to watch, and a lot of Californians. This is one of the most heavily populated areas in the United States, of course. We're right on the edge of it. Not that many people up here in the upper desert, but just 100 miles away in Los Angeles, a lot of people.
Joe, you hope to make a flight aboard the shuttle, don't you?
I sure do.
We don't want to turn this into a job application, but
No.
but you would hope to go up in one of these. What would you do as a mission technician aboard the shuttle? What role might you have to play?
The roles you play are during launch and entry. Those of what we call a flight engineer, similar to the flight engineers on the decks of the commercial airliners. You can take a lot of systems monitoring load off the commander and pilot, who are very, very busy during those phases, especially if they get problems, because they have to devote one guy to the problem, and then they don't have a team checking on each other anymore.
I see.
So we're developing that mission for the mission specialist during launch and entry. On orbit, Ken Mattingly described it to me as they get the vehicle into orbit and then they hand the keys to the mission specialist and say, here you go, baby, it's yours until we're ready to come home.
And you've got
You're the guy in charge of deploying the satellites, retrieving the satellites, doing the science, if any, keeping the payload specialists moving together according to the in-orbit flight plan. So the mission specialist is he's the cargo master.
And he's got a cargo bay large enough to put quite a large-sized boxcar in.
Indeed he does, yeah. And he's got a great big room down
Let's listen to John Young a little bit. He's getting a little impatient. He said this is one of the parts of the flight.
John doesn't think the passengers are going to wait this long to deplane. You realize we could have gone the whole orbit? They're doing pretty good, though. They're doing pretty good.
Just a little impatience showing through there at one point.
Yeah.
John Young saying when he heard from Mission Control in Houston that they're pushing as hard as they could.
Trip flight reports that he doubts that you'll have to wait for your luggage when you get off.
Hey, he's probably right. That takes a long part. Yeah, there's no telling where that luggage is. Started out in the Cape, and they said they were going to bring it here, but you know how that goes. I bet Nygren is out there with our luggage right at this very moment.
Would you verify that you have your stubs or your bags on your body?
I knew I forgot something.
Did they take anything special up that you know about?
They always carry a little kit. They usually carry some souvenirs for, of course, the members of their family.
Well, we can assure you that
traditionally for the others, guys in the office, guys and gals, I should say now, they bring us each a little something as a memento of the trip. And I expect they did, although we haven't asked.
That's nice.
NASA carries its own flight kit with flags and suitable mementos to be presented to contractors, dignitaries, deserving newsmen, and others who've
no, the deserving newsmen are fully recompensed. Thank you very much. Although it does make you think a little bit that maybe they'll shorten this period the next time around based on what they can learn this time about detoxifying the spacecraft and purging it.
Absolutely. This is the first flight of this airline, and they're going to get the baggage and the deplaning and all that stuff. That's a matter of routine. We'll be able to shorten it all up a great deal.
Yeah.
As we will the countdown and the turnaround. We hope for a time when it won't take a week to get the thing back to the Cape, when it'll maybe only take 2 or 3 days.
I'm struck by something. It's tempting at a time like this to kind of make fun of the commercial airlines, but they must be watching this with great pride too. The commercial airline pilots, anybody who flies, who has any sense of it, they see this as their future as well.
You bet. They're right. What's happened is that a new commercial airline has joined their august group.
And all things considered, they move a heck of a lot of people around the country in pretty good shape,
including us.
That's right.
We just heard that in a few moments that hatch is going to be opened. Coming open now.
It's opening, and it's been great talking to you.
Same here, Rick. One fantastic mission. We'll hope to see you guys either tonight when we get back or tomorrow anyhow.
Well, that's the end of a beautiful relationship.
Yep.
That means that Mission Control in Houston is now going to be very shortly out of contact with Young and Crippen, and Young and Crippen will now be in contact with the rest of us terrestrial beings here at Edward Air Force Base.
We at NASA would shorten it to TBs.
That's one of the technicians. That's not an astronaut. See, the last time we had a look at this was when the access arm was swung over in the orbiter access arm at Cape Canaveral.
That's right, after the launch hold.
When that was the last contact with this part of the spacecraft by human beings, and you see a technician now on his hands and knees at the bottom of your picture, unbolting. I'm not exactly sure how that works, Joe. Do they unbolt it from the outside?
They do. It has dogs or levers that come out all around the circumference of the hatch, and they just stick a big tool in there and rotate them all back in, and then the hatch swings open. It wouldn't be too surprising if it was just a little sticky getting open after what it's been through.
Now, it's hot out here. Is it air conditioned inside the shuttle now?
It was, and I'm sure that the temperatures will rise very slowly.
Because they don't have a lot of external power to keep well, I guess they do.
Columbia, Houston, side comment from Dr. Kraft here. We might have to go back to water landings.
Whoa!
no, just a comment on time duration, but it'd be nice to get down on firm ground.
Roger that.
Especially nice for a pilot like John Young, who gets to bring her down on firm ground.
That's right.
Put the wheels down himself. But in the future, it will be
Convoy
largely a
commander
computer
reported
landing.
The hatch is open.
We'll
Seals are
work
being
toward
purged
that
and, be a
bit
little
by
while
bit.
before they're given
I
go
can't
for
predict
the
what flight will first
exchange crew
take
and,
it automatic
the
all the way to
doctor go
touchdown,
forward.
but you'll see the crew taking
Exchange
over at
crew
lower
is
and
not
lower
composed of
altitudes.
astronaut tower that this crew
as the
mans
flights go
Columbia
on.
while it is being towed.
What you'll be seeing there in a minute is the exchange crew going aboard. That will, that is a crew that will. Now I think maybe they're coming out, but
You'll see John Young first.
these are the technicians coming down. I believe we'll see somebody go up those stairs first. I'm not absolutely certain about that, but it should be Dr. Craig Fisher.
There he is.
Nope, there they are. John Young. They skipped the medical phase. They came out early. There's John Young coming down the stairs.
And that's Mission Control in Houston getting a standing ovation.
And there they are.
Yeah, he's a happy man. Happy to be out of there and happy
Yeah.
that this has worked well.
Yeah.
And looking absolutely healthy.
Doing a little quick walk around just as you predicted, Joe Cohen.
Just so.
Looking
He shook
at the
hands
tile.
with George Abbey, and now he's going to look at the airplane. A good pilot always does a post-flight.
Crippen is still inside, I believe.
Yes. He'll be out shortly.
I guess Young just couldn't contain himself. He came out before the doctor went in.
That's
Then the
right.
doctor went in, and he's in there with Crippen now.
It's trouble with these veterans of 5 flights in space.
Look at that.
I would say he's not an unhappy man at the moment.
He's giving everybody the thumbs up sign.
That's right. He's thanking all the team out there.
Gee, that's about as animated as you see John Young, isn't it? I mean, he's a very
That's right.
laid-back character. Man of few words.
Mhm.
Joe, from listening to the traffic between Houston and Crippen, he was just apparently finishing up a little work in there.
Apparently he was. It must
Yeah.
have been something a little extra that wasn't in the checklist, but he just signed off
That's right.
this minute.
So he ought to be coming down the stairs in a minute.
Right.
If body language tells us all.
I would call that a test pilot strut.
Yes, sir.
Well, we've said it before, there are going to be hundreds of these things made, and John made the first one.
Yes, that's right.
He certainly has been fulsome in his praise of the Columbia as a spacecraft, as an
He has
airplane, as a
indeed.
flying
He
machine.
has
He said it
indeed.
was a super piece of machinery.
He said earlier the L over D is better than advertised. That means that the thing doesn't come down quite as steeply as the engineer said. It's got a little more lift.
That's right.
This is good.
A little better glide than they thought.
Yeah.
Now he's going back up again.
Now he wants to help Crip get out, huh?
Two
Where
at a
is that
time.
guy? Boy.
We've just heard from Mission Control in Houston that they've handed over this operation now the landing control here at Dryden. That's the name of the official NASA center at Edwards Air Force Base and the Rogers Dry Lake. Look at John Young continue to talk.
He's telling him how accurate it was.
What are the bulges in the back of that suit?
I'm trying to figure that out. I think that's just, those are vent hoses, and it's just the way the suit's made with that extra bulk for pressurization.
Now, that's not a flight suit, that's the ejection suit, right, Joe Kerwin?
The ejection escape suit.
Right.
Yeah, it's an Air Force suit. And we'll quit wearing that after 3 or 4 flights. We'll remove those ejection seats and fly this thing like an airliner with ordinary airline couches.
All right, now it's handed over to landing control, which is here at the Dryden Research Center. And there is Bob Crippen.
There he is.
Happy Texan. His standing ovation. Bob Crippen's mother runs a tavern in Texas, in a small town. Porter, Texas, I think is the name of the town. And she wasn't real certain she wanted to go down and see the launch, but she did because he wanted her to be there. I suspect they may be having a fairly good time in that tavern in Porter, Texas at this moment and for the rest of this day.
Well, there they are in their van that will take them to the dispensary and a reunion with their families.
There's a surrogate commander and pilot in the vehicle now that are going to finish up the
But they're not
the
astronauts,
activation
are they?
tasks. That's an embarrassing question. I'm not sure.
I don't think
who
they are. I think they
you're
are.
right. I think they're.
I think they're NASA people, but they're
Yeah.
not part of the astronaut
Yeah,
program.
I didn't recognize the voice. It's just impossible to say how much more you know about a vehicle after 1 flight than you do after 0.
Well,
You
there'll
know.
be a very extensive debriefing of Young and Crippen, won't there?
Yes, yes, extremely extensive as usual.
And then they'll compare what they remembered with what the various flight recorders indicated.
Just so. But this will help the planners so much, knowing precisely what the L over D is, precisely what the weight lifting capability is on launch, how much reaction jet fuel you have after touchdown, how much fuel for the hydraulic control. It'll enable you to expand the envelope and do so much more with the airplane.
Let's expand the knowledge within the within the envelope. Joe Kerwin, our resident expert here with us today, as he has been from launch to touchdown. And we'll continue with our coverage now of the return. Crippen, right there in that mobile van, heading for a reunion with their families and then a public appearance here at Edwards Air Force Base, the dry lake bed where they landed today and landed successfully 54.5 hours after they took off from Cape Canaveral. We'll continue after this. Well, we're watching astronauts Crippen and Young. Actually, they're inside that mobile van. It looks like a camper. It's been configured to carry them from their spacecraft, from the Columbia orbiter, back over to a special area where they will meet their families. And we have with us here at the special desk that we have for NBC News coverage of the landing of the Columbia orbiter, Fitz Fulton, who was with us earlier. Fitz is the guy who flies the 747, which flies the Columbia orbiter. Once it's been cleaned up and gone over and kind of tuned up again, it will fly back to Cape Canaveral because in this case, we put a big deposit down and we get a return in the space program for the first time. We get to use the spacecraft once again. Fitz not only flies 747s, he's been a test pilot here at Edwards since 1950, and he's flown all kinds of airplanes. Now, give us your best bird's eye view of that landing as it came in today. What did you think?
It'd be pretty hard to fault it, really. I'd say it's about as outstanding as you'd hope to see. It's great.
Was there any surprises as far as you were concerned?
No, I think really it was just exactly like you'd expect. The approach, the last part of it was just like it was done on the launches off the top of the 747. So, John looked like he had a handle on it all the way from the beginning.
Let me ask you a really simple question about the next procedure. When you ferry this down to Florida once again, how do you get that big bird up on top of this bigger bird?
Well, it gets lifted up on a so-called mating and demating device, and it's raised up, and then the 747 is towed underneath, and then lowered down, and then bolted with 6 bolts in the rear, 1 bolt in the front.
Do you have to be especially careful about the kind of weather that you're flying in when you go down there?
Well, yes, we have some constraints on ferry operation. We are not allowed to fly in any visible moisture. We try to stay at an altitude where the temperature is not freezing, because there's still some fluids on board the orbiter, which they will leave on there all the way back to Florida. And so it's just trying to fly in visual conditions and not expose it to any unusual conditions.
Well, Fitz, we want to take a look now at the center where the astronauts are arriving. We say they'll be meeting NASA officials and members of their family there before making a more public appearance here as well. I don't know whether we'll get a close-up of that or not. That's from a helicopter, obviously, that has been hovering overhead. In fact, at one point, NASA kind of had to chase it out of the way, but it's got cameras on board, and they're recording it for NASA purposes as well. It's just over that way, and then they'll end up back over this way at some point. What do you have in the rest of the 747? Is there special ballast that you have to put in an airplane like that when you're flying with one on top?
Well, actually, the 747 has been stripped out. If you took an airline airplane and took all the seats out and all the passenger convenience items and all the insulation out, and that's the way this airplane looks. It's just a big, long, open tube inside. And of course, it has extra structure built here by the Boeing Airplane Company, and again built up here, which allows the attach points to distribute the load.
Well, what's the long-range forecast on the carrying of a space shuttle orbiter back and forth across the country? Always a 747, or at least for the foreseeable future?
Anytime you have to transport it any distance, you put it on top of the 747. Of course, it's been transported by land between here and Palmdale, California. The factory, that's only 35 miles or so, but anytime you go any distance, you put it on this. This is just part of the support equipment for the whole
But now
program.
they'll be launching them from California as well in the future. At least that's the plans from Vandenberg Air Force Base.
That's true, and that's the long-range plan. That's correct. And when that's done, still, if you have to bring it back to Palmdale for any refurbishment, you'd put it on top of the 747.
You're a test pilot of long standing. You heard John Young, or if you haven't, I'll tell you. He says it's just a super piece of machinery, a flying machine, and it performed a lot better than even he thought that it would. You kind of itch to get your hands on something like the Columbia Orbiter.
I'd love it.
Well, I wish we could arrange it, but I'm afraid we...
The orbiter weighs 98 tons when it's on the ground here as it is now.
That's approximately so, yes.
I'm not a flyer. Does that make it tip over or weave back and forth, or what does it do? I mean, is the 747 less stable with that 98 tons, which also has wings and an elevator on top of it?
Well, it does change the stability slightly, but the 747 has such a margin of stability and safety already that when you add this to it, and with the extra structure and the extra fins back here, you have an airplane very near equivalent to a standard airline configuration as far as safety goes and structure goes. This is it's a special purpose airplane now. We don't use it for anything else except that.
It's like everything else around here. It's remarkable to see the one on top of the other. We'd like to show you now the building in which the astronauts are having their medical examination. There it is with a crowd nearby. That's the local dispensary. They're just going over their, they're draining blood, as Dr. Kerwin told us. They're measuring their height, probably taking their weight, nothing more special than that. Maybe blood pressure, Joe?
They'll do
probably,
the routine things,
yeah,
sure.
Standard things. And then after that, they'll be coming out to go over to the VIP stands, where we hope we'll hear a few words from Mr. Young and Mr. Crippen, who have accomplished such a remarkable flight today. And we'll have more coverage of this whole story after this.
It's Daffy Duck's Easter Show and the Berenstain Bears Easter Surprise. Then, deadly cargo could put BJ out of business. Tuesday on NBC.
finding out that the Columbia Orbiter has pretty good homing instincts, it turns out, because it began its trip here, actually. He flew it in the 747 down to Cape Canaveral before it could be launched into space, and then returned here once again. So it does have a pretty good sense of where it belongs, and it's back here at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We have Roy Neal now standing by at Mission Control in Houston, which, of course, was in charge of the flight while it was up in the air, up in space and back in the atmosphere. Roy?
Okay, Tom, and with me, of course, Judy Resnick, astronaut mission specialist for whom just maybe this was a preview of coming attractions.
I hope so.
I know you certainly got excited, especially during the landing area.
Well, it was good to see such a successful flight. It was a spectacular launch, a perfect mission, and the touchdown couldn't have been better.
And now all those people, Judy, in Mission Control still won't let go. They're all there. This is the scene right now, live in Mission Control. Can you spot a few friends of yours in there?
Well, there's a lot of people milling around. I see Rick Hauk in the middle, who was the Capcom during the entry phase. They're getting ready to power down there, I think. They're pretty happy, and they ought to be. They did as good a job as the crew did in supporting us.
That's a reverse view, and where the big mission map was throughout the flight, there's now a big American flag. It looks rather beautiful, and to the right, the television screen still flickering. I guess they're still looking there and watching the events at Edwards. Oh, there's Gene Krantz in the middle. See him with his crew
Yes,
cut,
and to the right
hands?
of him is Don Putty, who was the entry flight director.
Who was talking with the astronauts near the end of this. Up on the top row, management row, can you spot anybody up there for us?
Not right now. I can't recognize anybody up there from this distance.
Dr. Kraft should be up there, but I'm trying. Here he comes, I think.
He's off to the right. He's walking in the middle. I'm just getting ready to go down
the picture. Now, there are other things to happen here, of course. There will be news conferences at Edwards, which will be joined by flight people here. But I guess the next biggest event, as far as the Johnson Space Center is concerned, will be Ellington Air Force Base in, perhaps 3 hours or so.
Well, after the crew is finished with their medical examination at Edwards, they will probably say a few words to the VIPs at Edwards, get onto an airplane with their families, and return to Ellington, as you say, in about 3 or 4 hours, where they will do basically the same thing. They'll get off the plane and be greeted by some dignitaries, say a few words, and then I think they're going to let the crew go home and have a good night's rest.
And the families, Mrs. Young, Mrs. Crippen, the 3 Crippen girls, and I think if you folks at Edwards thought you had a big crowd, I suspect they're going to have just about as big a crowd at Ellington when these astronauts come home. John?
Thank you, Roy. The authorities are saying here that the crowd that came, an enormous crowd that came here to Edwards Air Force. Animation.
Yeah, that's animation. And that's from outside. These are 60-foot long doors, and as Joe says, they want to be very sure that nothing on the Columbia Orbiter itself is out of sync. It underwent a pretty good buffeting. It's made of lightweight aluminum on the...
Now, there's the real picture from space. That's a live picture from 100 miles up in space, give or take a few miles. Happening right now, 1.5 hours after they left the pad here at Cape Canaveral.
Okay, that's a picture of inside the payload bay now, looking up and aft toward the doors. The doors are closed in that picture.
Now, these doors are reversed. The starboard door...
See the little piece of debris floating up through the cargo bay?
So over 100 miles up, going 17,600 miles an hour, but it's very quiet up there.
We'd like to verify that the DFI is in high sample.
What's that mean, Joe?
The DFI is special instrumentation, and they just want it moded to high sample rates so it'll record all this activity.
We show all of the bulkhead latches closed now, and they're now going up the center line.
Okay.
Latching up the center line now.
This is not terribly dramatic in terms of a picture, but it is critical to this mission and critical to the future of the space shuttle.
Right, they're verifying the ability to relatch the doors, and only when they've done that will they be given a go to reopen the doors, both of them.
Among other things, they want to make sure that they can close them tightly when they come back out of orbit 2 days from now from Edwards.
The doors are very much part of the structural strength of the orbiter, and you can't re-enter with them closed.
The DFI is in high sample, please. Fabrication, D020.0010. Roger. Position of the push is in high sample. I've got a gray talkback at this time, like it's still running. Roger, we see it still running, Grip. Okay, you want me to go to low sample on it? Roger, we'd like to cycle it to low sample. Okay, we're in low sample, and I've still got a gray talkback.
Joe.
Roger, we show it still in continuous record. We'll take a look at it.
Crippen and Young are now floating around, or are they using those the suction cup shoes?
I suspect they are floating around. They have not yet doffed their ejection escape suits. They haven't had time to put on the suction shoes. It'll be very interesting when they get back to talk about how well they worked and whether they were needed at all.
And Columbia, for the CDR, we'd like to know if your TV picture is somewhat washed out or if you got a good clear one.
How about the best picture you can get?
Roger.
It looks very washed out from here.
One half of it does. It looks now as if they have two cameras, each with half the screen.
Television is very important up there, not just for our purposes, but because that's how they inspect each of the hinges and determine if there are any problems.
When we opened up that right door, well, first when we opened up the center lines, we noticed no movement at all in the door. When I opened up the 4.5 bulkheads, it maybe bounced up half an inch, and door opened up nice and smooth, came back. It looked like we'd come through about position alpha, and it came on down all the way to getting it closed.
This is Shuttle Control, Houston. 1 hour and 40 minutes mission elapsed time. We show Bob Crippen again unlatching the doors, going down the center line now. Roger, Cripp, we copied the first part of that, and then we went into a handover, but we copied that everything was right down the pike on the closing.
That's affirmative.
Joe, what we're looking at, that dark diagonal line, is that where the two doors come together, do you suppose?
As best I can tell from that picture, that's correct. Yes, and when Cripp said position alpha, he meant that when they closed the door, the position of the latch was exactly on the nominal point for completing the latch.
Where it should have been.
Right where it should have been. That's good news.
So what we're